Everyone here in Chambers, as well as on online, Facebook, or otherwise. It's great to have you all with us here today. Before we begin, this past year has been very challenging in many different ways. Faced a lot of different things that we probably weren't prepared for. And as we're coming out of this unprecedented time with the pandemic and everything, many of us continue to face challenges or have lingering repercussions from the events of the past year. Some of us have experienced loss. Others, changes in our domestic situation, our job situation. Others are just trying to cope with what seems to be a new normal out there. The goal for today is really to provide information from local experts and leaders to help us all navigate life's continuing challenges. I continue to see lots of mental health issues in our community here locally. I experience them some firsthand, but also hear from a lot of different people. And you're going to hear today from people who have firsthand experience of seeing mental health issues rising dramatically right here. I think many times we like to think that that happens somewhere else. It doesn't happen here. But that's not true, and you're going to find that out today if you don't already believe that the mental health issues are right here locally. And it's something that I think has been taboo at times, that we it's kind of a silent thing. We don't want to talk about it. It's something that maybe can be awkward to talk about. It's not a physical ailment that you can see. It's something that's internal and more difficult to really be evident at times. And so I wanted to do everything I could to bring to the forefront the need for help in this area, mental health here locally in our city and the region. And then we have a wealth of resources that are assembled here and some that maybe aren't even represented here that I think can be very beneficial to help with the mental health crisis that we have here locally. So before we get to the panel, we have a great panel that you'll hear from, and the format will be that we'll hear from each panelist for a few minutes, and then you can write a question down or remember what your question might be, and then at the very end, we'll try to do our best to get to all those questions that you have at the end of our time. This is going to be a little difficult for me because it's very close to home. Recently, we lost a public servant, a first responder who was deeply connected to our community, firefighter Ty Seats. Ty was a firefighter and a paramedic with Prescott Fire Department. He was also a veteran who served our country overseas. And Amy Moore, mother of firefighter Ty Seats, is my special guest today to share some of the life of Ty Seats. And let me just say with Ty, it's difficult when you lose a first responder, any first responder in your community. This one is doubly so because he's one of our own. Ty grew up here. He was a member of our community from birth, and I coached Ty in Little League. My son Brady played baseball with Ty, and he was someone that was known in the community, was a pillar in our community, and was someone that we raised, who went off to serve in the military as well as then serve honorably on our fire department. And so Amy did a tremendous job at Ty's memorial recently, sharing about his life and his struggle. And I thought it answered a lot of questions. I thought it was very powerful. And I thought it would be very helpful setting the stage for today. It'll be difficult for Amy possibly, although she had amazing composure at the memorial. I was amazed with that. And yet I thought, while it's very heavy, it's important and it's very pertinent. So Amy, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being an amazing leader, an amazing mom. And thank you for bringing Ty's story to us today.
I will ask you to bear with me. I'm going to do my best to get through this. As Greg said, my name is Amy Seats. 3 weeks ago tomorrow, my 26-year-old son lost his battle with PTSD. I am beyond devastated. My world has come to a shattering halt. I don't want to be here today. I don't want to be talking about this. But then it hit me. Isn't that the problem? No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to think about it. We want to stick our heads in the sand, and we want to think that if there are no overt warning signs, then everything is okay. I did. So I am here today, and I'm going to give you a glimpse of the man that my son was, to show you just how easy it is for the demon that is PTSD to lurk where you'd never expect it. I'm going to share Ty's story with you. It's gritty and it's difficult, but it's real, and I won't make it prettier or easier because it's not. My hope is that I will reach even one person, cause one person to sit up and take notice, take action, and hopefully spare even one person the unbearable agony I now live in. Because if I can do that, then my being here and talking about this will be worth it. Ty was my firstborn. He and his brother, Wyatt, are my everything. Ty loved God, his family, and his country. Right behind those things, he loved baseball and hunting. He lived for those 5 things. He was saved when he was 7 years old and proudly told a friend that he'd asked Jesus into his heart. His reasoning? I think I'm going to need him. As he grew older, he grew wiser in the Lord in ways that surprised me. I shouldn't have been, but somehow I was. Maybe as a parent, you just don't expect your child to have better insight than you, but so often he did. He gave wise and biblical counsel and was steadfast in his faith. He loved the Lord with his whole heart. His uncles and grandpa were his mentors, heroes, and baseball coaches. The bonds between them were forged in iron and completely unbreakable. His Grammy was one of his favorite people ever, and he'd do anything in the world for her. He had 3 little cousins who were 100% certain that he hung the moon, and he in turn was pretty sure that they had. Ty was an amazing brother. Big brother. When he left for the army, he gave Wyatt his room and mailed him letters with plans to revamp it into a man cave. He sent him letters about baseball, letters just encouraging him. At the end of his one-station unit training, at his turning blue ceremony when infantry soldiers get pinned, typically by a spouse or parent, Ty chose his little brother to do the honors. He came home on leave one year, and he and I conspired to surprise Wyatt, who cried when he saw him. And Ty brought him a grappling hook, and you've never seen a more excited kid. They didn't always see eye to eye, as most brothers don't, but even if Ty was mad at him, he loved him fiercely and wouldn't let anything or anyone hurt him. Sort of a he's mine to torture kind of thing. Their good-natured rivalry has long been the source of much amusement. For years, I've gotten cards from the boys for one occasion or another where they'd each sign something along the lines of the cooler son or the better-looking son. Ty loved being a small-town country boy and was unapologetically about as redneck as they come. He was proud of his deep roots in Prescott, proud to serve the community where he was born and raised, and where his kids made those roots run 5 generations deep. He was honored to be the first one in the 3rd generation of our family to graduate from Prescott High School. Honored to have been born at YRMC just like his Grammy mom and uncle before him. Tradition was very important to him. He started in Prescott Little League when he was 4 and played there all the way until high school. He played travel ball too as well. He was an original Prescott Rebel. He hunted every chance he got, and in our family that's a lot. In high school, he fished before school and had ball practice after. He studied ballistics for fun. He loved working on trucks. He loved American history and was very knowledgeable about it. He was just an all-American good old boy that everyone loved and respected. Ty was a rock-solid man of his word. If he told you he'd do something, you could take it to the bank. He was a monument to integrity and hard work. He had a love for shopping on Amazon, which his amazing wife insists he got from me. He loved nothing more than to help others. From big things to small, it didn't matter. He just wanted to help. At a very early age, he took it upon himself to be the family protector. He wanted to protect everyone he loved, no matter what it took. He was mischievous, ornery, and fun-loving. He approached life with the enthusiasm of a child and had a great sense of humor. He loved his trucks, his guns, his bow, and his Abu Garcia fishing gear. He loved Copenhagen. He loved baseball movies and Major Payne. He was always quoting movies and did an excellent Major Payne impression, and taught his daughter to as well. He and I were sitting at the kitchen table one night when he got the notification that the Army had found Agent Orange in his blood work. I started to freak out a little, but he just looked at me with that big old grin he always had, and in his best Major Payne voice said, "You're gonna make my Agent Orange act up." His kryptonite was ice cream, and he took it as a personal insult when his favorite flavor got discontinued, and he even emailed the company. He loved pranks, firing his 3 little cousins up, picking at his brother, and teaching his daughter things that made his wife raise an eyebrow and then laugh about. He did it all with such a gleam in his eye. He also loved his dogs and my dogs. He'd never come over that he didn't stop on the way up to the house to scratch my dog's head and play with her a bit. He used to Skype his dog Bo when he was in the Army. He'd call, "Hi, Mom, put Bo on." Bo worships him, and he'd whine and lick that computer screen trying to get to his boy. Ty was the hardest worker you'd find and did everything at 110%. His work ethic was unparalleled. His moral compass pointed true north. He was very black and white. He had unmovable lines about right and wrong, and he wasn't afraid to speak up about it. There's a song called "You Can Always Tell a Country Boy" by Rodney Atkins. There's a line in it that's always made me think of Ty. It says, "He leaves no doubt about where he stands on a Chevy or the Lord," and that was Ty to a T. He loved them both fiercely. He never let grass grow under his feet, always had about a dozen irons in the fire at any given time. But while he did everything at Mach 10 with his hair on fire, he still had patience to glass for big bucks or bulls for hours, or wait out one of the big bass he loved to fish for. He loved knives. He always had at least 3 on him at any given time. Wyatt used to say he even hid them in his legendary comb-over. He started bodybuilding in the Army and found in it a new passion. He had just gotten yet another new sponsor and was training for a show in August that he was really excited about. He was strong and smart and capable. He was dogged in the pursuit of his dreams. There wasn't an ounce of quit in him ever. Ty loved music. His grandpa taught him to play guitar, and he loved to sing, too. He instilled that love of music in his 3-year-old daughter. Ty and I talked a lot about music. We loved to show each other new songs we'd found that we liked. We communicated with songs. When he finally found out he was getting out of the Army, he didn't call me. He just texted me a link to Ozzy's "Mama, I'm Coming Home." I'd never cried at Ozzy before. Ty was an instigator, a prankster. He loved shenanigans. Sometimes his logic was simply hilarious. He often challenged himself to do something just to see if he could, and he always could. He was fearless. He was always cooking up some harebrained plot or scheming to accomplish some crazy idea he'd had. He was quick to drag his buddies into the mayhem, too. Riding his bike to the house that his uncle was building to help him work on it with a cheeseburger in his pocket just in case he got hungry. Putting his brother on a boogie board and pulling him through a mud puddle in the middle of the road with his bike. Hucking coffee creamers off a hotel roof with a buddy because it looked cool when they splattered. Sending another buddy plummeting down a driveway on a creeper with nothing but a ball helmet on his head and a bat to navigate just to see what would happen. Ditching school to go hunt. Roping the dummy off the world's boogeriest horse just to see if he could do it without getting bucked off. Trying to get Wyatt or me to buy a new truck that he wanted, but his wife said he couldn't get. Striking it rich gold panning, blow dart hunting, the list is endless. He just loved to have fun. On September 11th, 2001, Ty was 7 years old. That afternoon, as he went with his Grammy to pick his little brother up, he talked with her about the events of that day. Even at 7, he was fiercely patriotic. He told his Grammy then and there that when he was old enough, he was going to join the Army and fight the bad guys that had done this to his country. He spent the next 11 years focusing on playing college baseball and going on to pitch for his beloved LA Dodgers. But in spite of the fact that he was an outstanding baseball player who was indeed being scouted, he and his best friend Mike, with whom he did everything, came to me a few months before high school graduation and sat me down with a proposition. They wanted to join the Army right after high school. I reacted like you'd expect, but those crafty devils anticipated me. They looked me square in the eye, and Ty said, "Mom, God knew my days before I was born. It doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing. When it's my time, it's my time." That was just Ty's logic. And I was mad because I couldn't argue with him. He was right. Ty was that guy. The one that could do anything. It didn't matter what he did, he succeeded. He had a 90-plus mile-an-hour fastball. He was an outstanding shot. One heck of a fisherman. When he and Mike went into the Army, they told me matter-of-factly that they'd either be Rangers or in the elite 101st Airborne. It seemed like a long shot, but Ty was offered both. I don't know how they did it, but they did, and they both went to the 101st Airborne. They were in different brigade combat teams, but they were in the same place, and that was all that ever mattered to them. Ty's unit was the 150 Deuce, First Strike, the War Dogs. He loved it. He learned to jump out of helicopters, drive tanks. He was a master gunner, and he became a sniper, too. He and Mike learned to hunt whitetail in the woods back east, which are so different from what they'd grown up hunting here. They caught lots of big fish in the lakes around Fort Campbell. It was every patriotic redneck kid's dream. He deployed to Afghanistan as a scout sniper. He led a team of several men, one of whom was his spotter. His job was literally to kill bad guys, and he was good at it. When he came home from deployment, in very typical Thai fashion, he seemed none the worse for the wear. When he came home from the army, he went straight to work while going to school so he could become a firefighter like his uncles, his dream job. He'd had a crush on Mike's pretty cousin for some time, and I'll be darned if he didn't marry her. Mike came home too and bought a house 0.2 of a mile away from Ty on the same street. Ty was there when Mike's son was born and has been Uncle Ty ever since. Ty and I were honored to be Mike's son's godparents. Ty had family and friends that loved him beyond measure, and he knew it. He had a turkey tag. He was looking forward to the fall draw results finally coming out. He had a bodybuilding show he was working towards, his little cousin's baseball team to coach, even a movie we were planning to take the kids to see last weekend. Last July, he got his first niece. He adored her and couldn't wait to teach her to hunt. He had plans. He had just bought some mining claims and was pretty sure he was going to hit the mother lode. He had 2 gorgeous little babies, a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son who worshiped their daddy. His daughter wouldn't let him leave the house without her on his days off. He took those kids to work out with him, hunting, fishing, gold mining, you name it. He taught his daughter the ins and outs of a fire truck, and she likes to show you the radio daddy talks on in an emergency, or where he keeps his fire hose. He built his daughter a zip line at our elk camp last year, and even when he was exhausted, he still kept hauling her back up to the top so she could go down it again and again. He was the best dad. He had a simply amazing and beautiful wife that loved him to the ends of the earth, just as he did her. His beloved dog was his constant companion. They were a perfect family. He was a strong, godly man. He was in top physical condition, as strong as an ox. He was loved and respected. He had the best friends you could imagine. He had his dream job and worked with his uncle, his hero. He was a good provider, which allowed his wife to be a stay-home mom. He literally had a picture-perfect life. Except that all was not as it seemed. PTSD had hitched a ride back from Afghanistan with Ty. It took several years to rear its ugly head. He knew it was there, but in typical Ty bullheadedness, he thought he had it handled. He downplayed it and brushed it off. He seemed fine for a long time, burying what he was dealing with inside, being tough, protecting his loved ones, being Ty. I'm going to be true to Ty here, and I'm not going to pull any punches. I am devastated, but I'm not ashamed. I want this to be out in the open. I pray that Ty's story will resonate and hopefully make a difference, save another family from the pain that we're all feeling. For the past year or so, Ty's had some infrequent bouts of going into what I just learned is called a dissociative suicidal state for a few hours. Then he'd snap back out of it like flipping a switch, only to not even remember it and be stunned, horrified, and remorseful when told about it. We tried to get him help, and he even talked it out a little with someone and was better for a long while. He hadn't had an incident in some time. We didn't think he was over the hump, but we were hopeful he was on the way. We thought we were handling it right. I think he thought that little bit of talking was enough to allow him to handle it alone. Ty was proud and strong. He wanted to do things on his own. That was just who he was with everything. I say this with total confidence because he got that particular trait from me, so I know exactly where he was coming from. He didn't want to burden others with his issues. He wanted to protect us from the weight he carried. He always wanted to protect those he loved, but in doing so, he ultimately deprived us of what we really wanted, him. He didn't want to be weak, and in his mind, getting help seemed just that. Especially since he couldn't remember what he'd said or done in those states, so when he snapped out, he was fine like always. He didn't think there was a problem. He thought we were overreacting or being dramatic when we asked him to get help. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Ty and I have always been big proponents of calling it like it is, so I'm not going to shy away from that. Ty didn't get help. Not because it wasn't available, not because he wasn't loved, and not because we didn't try. He let his pride and desire to protect those he loved from his demons overtake his common sense. He didn't want to talk about it either. He thought he had it handled. If you knew Ty or ever played ball with him, you knew that he hated losing. He always played with his whole heart and fought like hell to win. On Tuesday, March 16th, Ty entered into one of those states I mentioned. This one lasted longer and dug in deeper than any had before it. During that day, he was able to briefly come out of it a couple times. But this time, during those brief periods, he knew what was going on. In his final lucid words, he said that he had been taken over, that he could feel it coming, and he tried any and everything to keep it from happening, that he didn't want it to happen. And then he slipped back into that dissociative state. During the early morning of March 17th, Ty lost his battle with PTSD. I'm sorry. His Uncle Nate and I were with him, and he was not himself. Had he been, I wouldn't be here today, lost, hurt, confused, devastated. This was not a selfish act of taking the easy way out. This was voices in his head telling him lies that his conscious self had already recognized and called BS on. Looking back at his recent Instagram posts is a perfect indicator of where his head was at. He was all about family, hunting, fishing, and lifting. He was encouraging and proud of the family he adored, advocating hard work and toughness, appreciating what he had and knowing that it was a gift from God. That was the real Ty, the Ty we knew and loved. This was an unwelcome demon that plagued his mind. The Ty we knew and loved abhorred suicide. Just 3 days before he died, during a conversation with his wife, he talked about how he hated suicide and it was not something he'd ever do. He loved his life and he loved all of us. First responders are taught signs to look for when dealing with suicidal people, questions to ask. Ty had none of those signs. He had tons of both short and long-term plans and goals. He had everything going for him. He had no suicide plan. He wasn't giving away his stuff. He just didn't have any of the signs of being serious about it because he wasn't. I know that all parents think, my kid would never, but I'm not one of those parents. My kids are rabble-rousers. They're imperfect. They could do stupid things, and I'm fully aware of it all. I'm not afraid to call a spade, and if there was a chance that Ty might have consciously done this, I'd tell you that, because there's no shame in that either. I know most of you didn't have the privilege of knowing my son, so I ask that you take me at my word, or ask anyone who did know him. Ty would never have done this if he were himself. Never. And that's the hardest part, knowing that the demons in his mind cause his body to do something that his conscious mind would never do. And I never saw it coming. I'm his mom, and I never saw it coming. I just knew that Ty, of all people, wouldn't actually kill himself, no matter what he said when he was in one of those states. I guess I thought he still had some measure of control, but he didn't. He always snapped out of these states and he was fine. But this time, he didn't. The perfect storm of events transpired in the week leading up to his death. A tough Army anniversary, bad calls and difficult shifts at the fire department, lack of sleep both on and off duty, and a few other things, any and all of which alone would have been completely manageable. But all of it coinciding resulted in the longest and worst state he'd ever had, and it proved to be the straw that broke this mighty camel's back. Being with Ty that awful morning, hearing the way he spoke to his hero, his uncle, it was painfully clear that he was not himself. Yet somehow, I still thought we could snap him out of it at the 11th hour. Then suddenly, in an instant, my world stopped. Hearing the gunshot, that brief, sharp sound shattering the early morning silence, getting to him, working him alongside my brother, who's a medic, and knowing full well that even though we'd gotten his pulse back, he was gone. Hearing his agonal breathing and knowing that would be the last time I heard my son's beautiful, deep voice, seeing my hands covered in my son's blood and being unable to do what moms do and fix things. Having to go tell his little brother that he was gone and watching his whole world collapse around him. Seeing the pure, raw agony in his adoring grandparents' eyes as they learned that their adored firstborn grandson was gone. Hearing his wife wail and double over in pain, sobbing uncontrollably and asking why. These are memories that I'll never lose. Sights, sounds, smells that play on a loop in my head, ones that will never go away. I don't want them to, honestly. Those were the last moments I'll ever have with my baby boy. The one that I loved so much more than life itself. The boy I'd have gladly died 10 times over to have saved. And I couldn't. I'm not a big believer in counseling. I'm just not. I'm mentally strong, and after 20 plus years in law enforcement, I'm able to compartmentalize, cope, and deal. I've seen and heard my fair share of bad things. I've always dealt. But at the urging of several members of our firefighter family, I went to see the counselor they recommended. I didn't expect much, and I'll be honest, it was more to shut them up than anything else. But as I talked with her about the specific horrors of that morning that I flatly refused to share with anyone who knew Ty, memories that I flatly refused to let anyone else be haunted by, she said there was a treatment that could lessen the trauma. So I agreed to meet with the therapist who did that treatment. Again, I didn't expect much, but I figured I couldn't possibly be any worse off than I was, right? Can't hurt, might help. So I went. And I learned so much in that first visit. I couldn't understand how Ty was fine for several years after coming home from the Army. I couldn't understand how or why he got into these states. I couldn't understand why this time we couldn't pull him out of it. I couldn't understand how such a strong-minded, the strongest I've ever known, a strong-minded man could do something he was vehemently opposed to. So I talked to the counselor about it, and this is what she said. The human brain does not fully mature until the mid to late 20s. That's nothing to do with maturity, but is actually physically maturing, isn't complete until then. What this means is that when an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid goes to war, his brain is still physically immature. It doesn't function like it will when he's an adult. He goes and he does his job. He kills bad guys and feels righteous doing it. He's protecting his country, his family, and punishing those that would do them harm. And that's absolutely true in every sense. The problem is that when the brain matures several years later, they begin to look at those bad guys they eliminated as someone's brother, uncle, or father. They think, I have a brother, I have an uncle, I'm a dad. And it then becomes a moral and ethical issue that they don't know how to resolve because the military doesn't tell them this is possible. They don't educate them or their families. They don't offer the treatment that will teach them how to process this and move on. For a guy with a strong moral and ethical foundation especially, this can be devastating, even though they consciously know that they did nothing wrong. When something triggers those memories, they can go into a dissociative state where although they're totally able to function, they're not really themselves. As I said earlier, when he'd snap out of it, he had no recollection of anything he had done or said. When he was in that state, he did and said things that he normally would never have done or said. I'm certainly no mental health professional, but in my mind, the easiest way for me to understand this is that it seems like there was another person, if you will, in his mind that basically locked the real him away to protect him from the moral dilemma when it got bad. And it was this other person driving his body that did this. I've been to counseling 3 times now, and there's more on the horizon. But today, I'm here to tell you that my views have changed. It's not hocus pocus. It's not snake oil. It's helpful. I wish I'd learned that in time to tell Ty that our views on it had been wrong. I'm telling you all this, and I'm hoping you'll tell everyone you know. If I had known about brain development and how it can affect you, if I had known that there was a treatment to address it, if I had believed that that treatment wasn't for someone else, someone who just wasn't mentally tough, if I had known that mental health issues like this affected strong-willed people too, if I had believed that this was even a possibility in my mentally strong, iron-willed, able to do anything son, it would have drastically changed everything. I would have done so many things differently, but I didn't know. He didn't know. None of us knew what was really happening. The military didn't tell us. The VA didn't tell us. No one told us. We had no warning. This is why I'm here today. I'm telling you. Now you know. Now you can go and do things differently before it's too late. You have an opportunity that I did not. If he'd known this would happen, he'd have dropped his pride in an instant and done whatever necessary to spare the family he adored from this. I spent the first few days after he was gone praying that God wouldn't let him look down and see how badly we're all suffering. He would be devastated to know he was the cause of so much agonizing pain in the people he loves more than anything. Losing Ty to this has ruined lives and has brought countless others to their knees. I will never recover, never be whole again. It has deprived 3 little babies of all the things their daddy and uncle wanted so desperately to teach them. It's made a beautiful, happy girl a widow at 25 years old, facing a life she never wanted. It sent his fellow war dogs and firefighters into downward spirals, causing a far-reaching ripple effect to their families as well. The effects of this are and will continue to be infinite. So I don't know who here today needs to hear this, but please listen closely. Please do not let my precious boy's death be in vain. Please let him teach one last lesson. Let him give one more person the help they need. Remember that suicidal signs aren't always there with PTSD. If you see something that seems even a little bit off, even if it's brief, even if they seem okay before and after, take action. Get help immediately. It's okay if they think you're overreacting. It's okay if they get mad. Better that than the alternative. Getting help is not a weakness. It's not for other people. It does apply to you. Be diligent in making them realize it's necessary. It's critical. Reach out, speak up, talk about it. Don't hide it in a corner like a broken toy. Be upfront and honest about it. There simply is no shame. PTSD is not an embarrassment to be concealed. It's a disease every bit as lethal as cancer, so treat it as such. And if it's you that's struggling, remember that you are loved, you are needed, you are valuable, and there is help. Do it, if not for yourself, then for those to whom you matter. Don't let them suffer a lifetime of playing what-if games in their heads and having to live in misery without you. Please, take this seriously.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for your friendship.
Thank you.
Thanks for your courage. Thanks for sharing that story and the detail. I think it's a great call to action, and appreciate your transparency today. So thanks for being here today. All right, we're going to hear from the panel, but before we do that, John, do you want to share a few things with us? And
Sure.
Amy, I know that you have an appointment, so please feel free to scoot when you need to.
Thanks to everybody on Zoom. We have 43 folks on Zoom, so thank you for joining us. Just a few notes. All Zoom participants have been muted upon entry, and the host will keep them muted throughout the duration of the call. For the question and answer period, which will come at the end, we'll have you submit those by chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat, so make sure that you find that little chat bubble at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, and then I'll recite those a little bit later. We also ask that, if possible, don't use your video option. I see most of you are not. Just saves on bandwidth, and that helps quite a bit. Documents shared by the speakers will be on their screen during presentations. For the speaker's sake, I have them on this computer, so I'll just ask you to give me a little prompt, and we'll advance it for you when the time comes. And as I mentioned, questions will be taken at the end. We will take questions from those in the audience first, and I'll review those guidelines when we get to that point. So, Mr. Mayor, we can begin.
All right. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. We have a limited amount of time. We're going to move through this panel as quickly as we can to hear from the different resources around the region. And then, like John said, we'll do Q&A. So first speaker is Leslie Horton, Director for Yavapai County Community Health Services. And it's interesting, Leslie, we're finally together, and the main topic is not COVID numbers. Thank goodness.
It's a refreshing change.
Yes.
Even though a very heavy subject.
Yes, it is. Well, thanks for being here today, Leslie, and please share with us what you have in mind today on this topic.
Absolutely. And thank you, everybody. It's great to actually see some people in person here today, and to be up here and be able to share some information. It's a tough story to follow, and definitely a heavy subject. Mental health in our community has been a struggle for many, many years. It's nothing new to our communities to be struggling with mental health. Before the pandemic, which I will mention it a few times, because it's had some lasting effects in our communities in terms of mental health, especially as it relates to substance abuse and suicide, as well as other mental health ramifications. So, John, please go to the next slide. It might be, hopefully, it's not hard to see for
I think it's
the audience.
good on Zoom.
Is it on the screen? Okay.
That screen is tough, so we can share all these with everyone afterwards as well, if it's easier.
Perfect. Yeah, I wanted to put them on slides because it's a little bit tough to give you all this data without it being represented, and at least, especially if you want to use it afterwards. But the rest of our speakers here today will definitely be able to back up and give resources in regards to what I'm going to share right now. So prior to the pandemic, leading into it, during, and now especially coming out of it, which I hope we are at this point, but we still have a ways to go, we have some concerns as it relates to suicides, overdoses, and other mental health issues. Our rate prior to the pandemic of suicide was twice that of the state rate. Our overdose rate is exceedingly high. We have a significant increase currently in youth deaths of all types and lower rates of people seeking services. Sorry, there was a word missing there on the slide. Go ahead, next slide. One of the things that we do at the health department that I think is very valuable in creating public health approaches to issues as they relate to children in our community, and also planning interventions to hopefully prevent future deaths, is a child fatality review. I wanted to show you a comparison of 2019 versus 2020 stats for some of these issues that we're speaking about today. 2019, in Yavapai County, we had 1 homicide, 0 suicides, and 1 drug overdose, with 18 total deaths amongst youth. Those are 17 and younger. In 2020, we had 2 homicides, 5 suicides, 4 drug overdoses, and 0 COVID-19 deaths. School counselors are very concerned about the ramifications of the pandemic on our youth. We knew that they were struggling in a lot of ways prior to this, but there's a lot of kids right now that are lost to the school system. We don't even know where they are. There's thousands of them in our county alone. However, this dramatic increase in both overdoses, and please remember that these are only the youth that died due to these things. There has also been numerous other suicide attempts and numerous other overdose attempts, or overdoses that did not end in death. So with this, the counselors have expressed recently that they're very, very worried about these students, especially as they've returned to school. Now, most of our schools are back in session, but they're seeing the struggles that kids are having. Not only were they in somewhat, some kids had an okay time at home. They did all right. They were doing okay with online school, but were in somewhat abusive situations. Some were going without food. Some where the parents were working too much or outside of the home were dealing with neglect. There were many, many issues that did not end in the death stats that I've given you, but are creating a struggle for kids, not only while they were home, but will probably have long-lasting effects post-pandemic. So one of the other things that we've learned, and just by talking to my staff who are in the homes of many young families, is that our families are struggling with isolation. Women, especially young mothers and young families, are reporting to us that they're struggling with severe depression at higher rates than ever before, as well as anxiety and other issues that are plaguing the families right now as a result of the isolation created by this pandemic. So let's go to the next slide. One of the things that I wanted to touch on really quick that's not a piece of the data, but now a lot of studies have come out about the fact that kids are better off in school. And one of the things I shared here is that we did have zero COVID deaths for children, but we've had numerous other types of deaths. Overall, when we looked at our overall deaths in 2019, we had 18 total deaths amongst children. In 2020, we had 31. And so beyond those figures that I gave you, there also are deaths attributed to abuse, trauma, and other issues that children have been facing. So now a lot of studies have come out that children are better off in school. They thrive in school. We know that teenagers struggle no matter if they're in school or out of school, but they definitely struggle disproportionately when they're out of school. and away from their peers. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on online that's very unhealthy for our youth. And so it's one thing that I would advocate for in the future and down the road if we face another situation where schools are considering their options is to keep kids in school. I realize that there are some side effects of having kids in school and the possible spread of illness and those kind of things, but we did find, even with COVID, that schools proved to be a very COVID-safe place for kids. We didn't actually see, on a local level, we only had one outbreak in a classroom, and it was because the classroom was not following the mitigation measures that they were supposed to, and admitted to that. So all in all, you know, there is that point that for children, they're better off convening in school. Other populations, obviously during this time, we had to isolate. And there is a population in our community of seniors. It's about a third of our total population that is very at risk for COVID. And so I'll kind of work through the adult population here and then to the seniors. However, we just have to treat different populations differently when it comes to times like this, where we're seeing different struggles in different age groups. Hopefully we can get the proper help from all of the resources here and many, many others in the community that we need for our youth going forward, because just because school's back in session doesn't mean that the struggles end. So I'm going to move on here to overdose deaths, and then I'll go through suicides. But overdose deaths have increased slightly. It's not a huge increase like it was among youth, but overall, in 2019, we had 82 overdoses due to drugs, overdose deaths. And so I need to clarify, there's a lot of overdoses that happen that don't end in death and are people are revived through naloxone or Narcan or other means. So we had 82 deaths due to overdose in 2019, 86 in 2020. However, from what I'm hearing from law enforcement agencies and others is that we have had a rather large increase in overall overdoses. They're just being revived in a lot of cases by naloxone and Narcan. And so we are seeing these increases. Thankfully, there's life-saving measures in place that we can help them. With overdoses, though, they're disproportionately male. And so I think we can go on. This is just a breakdown of the ages. Most of our overdoses happen amongst males 18 to 29. And then the other age groups, it's kind of an average amongst all of those middle-aged age groups up to about 70. And then it drops off significantly. Go ahead, next slide. Oh, that one goes on to suicides. I guess in my notes, I had mentioned that 64% of our overdoses are male, 36% female. And so overdoses in some people's minds are different and separate from mental health issues, but for the most part, in most circumstances, overdoses do coincide with some sort of mental health issues and coping mechanisms or self-medicating. And so I wanted to bring that information forward because it is one of the things that many folks in our community are struggling with. And you know, we work to prevent these things among our youth. But I can imagine that after a year like this one that we've been in, some of these issues will have a trajectory that continues to accelerate for a little while here. And we need to really focus efforts in that area. And then I'm going to move over to suicides, which we just heard a heart-wrenching story in regards to, and so many families are hurting due to suicide in the family. It is or friends or a loved one. And it's just a tragic situation. And yet it happens far more than it should in Yavapai County. Our rate going into this year was 2 times that of the state rate in terms of our overall suicides. Suicides are also, like overdoses, predominantly male. 78% are men, 22% female this year. So this year in Yavapai County, or 2020. And then these are the causes of deaths on the slide up there, are the causes of the suicide deaths. So predominantly in our county, it is due to firearm. but then some of those overdose deaths overlap with suicide deaths, hangings, and then other. And so go ahead with the next slide. I think on the bottom of that last slide, actually go back to that really quick. Sorry to back it up. One of the things that I'd made a note of here is that what we're really trying to work on, and our medical examiner provided a lot of this data to me through his annual report, has been very concerning to him, the number of senior suicides. And so just before the pandemic, I had proposed a new project in Yavapai County, which a lot of our partner agencies are already working on, but to decrease senior isolation. It was literally like the day the pandemic started. And here I was presenting that we should cut down on senior isolation because of this, because we have this really high rate, 2 to 3 times the state average and way higher than the national average of senior suicide. And then had to back that off because I said, well, right now with COVID-19, we've got to tell people to isolate, and especially our seniors. However, this year, it just comes to mind more than not that our seniors were struggling before this, and they're going to be struggling far more after. I know even seniors now who have been vaccinated, we've done, what we can to protect them, and the fear is there that they just don't want to come out of the house. They have gotten, in a lot of ways, almost paralyzed by fear of the pandemic. It is still here. It's still a risk. But hopefully through vaccination, and thanks to our partner agencies that are doing that, as well as community interventions, we can try to draw our seniors back out to start convening socially and doing things within means and without risk, hopefully, to them. But we've got to somehow bring them out of isolation because this is a huge struggle for them. So, like I said, 2 to 3 times that of other Arizona counties, our seniors are ending their life in by suicide. Next slide, please. And then here's the breakdown of the ages. Now, you might notice that I had mentioned there was 5 suicides in 2020 of our youth. It actually only shows 3 here because 2 of those were outside of the county when they actually commit suicide, but their residence was here. So they were in other counties at the time of death. However, these other rates are significant, and I think that 18 to 29-year-old age group is a very high risk. Then it drops back down, but then increases over time there. And of those 50 plus, that's where we're really seeing a risk factor in our communities. And so, like I've mentioned, there are short-term consequences. These are only reflecting the 2020 data. I couldn't tell you what it's going to look like in the future, but I feel like these are some of the short-term consequences of what we've been through this year. And I can imagine that in many factors, not just suicide and overdose, but all other factors that revolve around the mental health issues we're facing are going to have struggles for years to come. And we're going to have to really place a focus on this issue. And I appreciate that our Mayor Mangarelli has been really placing a focus on this issue. Now, this is our 2nd mental health town hall this year to really identify that these are issues that are important. As we've heard, it's important to talk about it, to seek help, and to utilize these other resources that are here. So I think that's it for my slides. And thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Leslie. And if you have questions for Leslie, just hold on to those and we will get to those at the end of getting through the panel today. Our next speaker is April Rhodes. She's CEO of Spectrum Health. Welcome, April. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I also want to echo Leslie's appreciation for the city of Prescott and to you, Mayor Mangarelli, for hosting things like this and placing emphasis on such an important topic, because I think as we've heard and, talked about amongst ourselves, it's often something that we avoid, but it's incredibly important. And so it's a huge topic to try to cover in a 5-minute period of time. So I'm going to try to make just a couple of points and then hand off to my friend Tamara here. First, I want to say it's hard to believe that it's been a year, first of all, since we had this conversation at the start of the pandemic. And at that point in time, I think we're all kind of thinking that maybe this was going to last like a couple of weeks or maybe 2 or 3 months. And then we had to contemplate 6 months. And then how long is this going to take? And so, you know, during the course of that time, it's been incredibly overwhelming. So as I was reflecting back on this past year, one of the things that came up for me was my reflection on when I was getting my master's degree as a marriage and family therapist. And there's a huge focus on systems in marriage and family therapy. And so the treatment is really focused on an individual as a part of their overall system. So they're as a part of their family or a part of their town or a part of their county. And often what happens, just like in physical health, which people can always relate much more to, obviously, there's this, your body goes to great lengths to maintain this internal temperature of 98.6, right? And so if you go outside and it's hot, you sweat, that's so that your body can get back to that 98.6% or 98.6 temperature. The same is true really in any other kinds of systems. And so this is the first time, at least in, you know, my memory, that we can imagine something that has impacted the world, you know, the nation, our state, all at the same level. It's like we've gone through this collective trauma together, and it's been a real disruption to our overall system. And so just like our bodies, there's going to be this desire to get back to homeostasis and that same state where we establish whatever that new normal is going to be. And so there's a couple things I want to point out about the impact. I think we could talk a little bit about the negative impacts of COVID on mental health and mental wellness. But I also think it's important, and we have an opportunity to talk about some of the positive impacts that have come out of this pandemic as it relates to mental health. And so obviously some of the negative impacts, you know, we've certainly seen that at Spectrum. Spectrum is a whole health provider. Many of you in Prescott may know us as it relates to the vaccination stations and the efforts that we've made around vaccinating people. But core to our mission is, you know, behavioral health service delivery to the community. We were founded in 1965 in the Verde Valley and have provided behavioral health services, and now countywide are doing so. And we see, you know, that those vaccination efforts as being a part of that overall whole health care, because it was a way to get back to that homeostasis and establishing that sense of normalcy for the community. And so, you know, we've seen an impact on our other service lines with 25% call increases to our mobile crisis teams countywide. We are averaging 230 calls per month to mobile crisis response, which is that 25% increase over pre-pandemic. So, you know, we've seen those increases there. We've seen an increase in people reaching out for help with just mild to moderate anxiety and depression, much more so than we ever saw prior to the pandemic, largely related to those kind of stigma issues. You know, people weren't necessarily reaching out at the same rates. And so we see people reaching out for more mild conditions. We've seen an increase in the use of substances, primarily alcohol, as people are self-identifying that, you know, pre-pandemic, I didn't use or drink as much as I'm doing now. I'm home, I'm isolated. We've seen our worlds change overnight from not being able to go out in public, not being able to see friends and family, having people die that are close to us, being afraid of the pandemic. And one of the biggest issues we face here in the Prescott area is certainly to what Leslie was saying, our elderly population becoming more and more isolated and just simply afraid to go out and get the services that they do need. So we've seen all of those, you know, negative impacts. But I think a real bright spot and a real opportunity that we have as a result of this pandemic, and I think it needs to be focused on in conversations like this, is the willingness on a much broader scale of people to seek help and support for mental wellness. At Spectrum, you know, it's been our mission for a long time to make mental wellness a part of the healthcare discussion very early on. You know, we believe that it should be a part of those discussions when you're pregnant and about to have a child, once that child's born, you know, in those well care visits where you talk about everything under the sun to expect and having a new child physically, but you don't ever get into the mental challenges, you know, the mental health challenges of having children, or if you're adopting children, or whatever those changes to your family system might be. There's very little discussion about that in that healthcare environment. And so I think that we have a real opportunity right now as a result of the pandemic, because there's this much larger acceptance of seeking services and of people being more willing to, you know, we can look to our neighbors and see that everybody's kind of struggling with the same things. And we all have challenges to our mental wellness. This past year has been challenging for all of us, but we're able to see it in this context of everybody's everybody's struggling with this. And so people are much more likely. It's done a lot, I think, in the past year to reduce the stigma of reaching out for help, of finding the help when you need it. And in Yavapai County, we do have a lot of resources available. One of the things that comes to mind as I was listening to Amy talk is our Responder First program at Spectrum. We've created these programs kind of like behind the scenes because that's what needed to happen in order to get first responders to engage, is to have this. We didn't really talk about it necessarily. Like, we made it available and we tried to get the word out, but we don't talk about it as much as we really should. And so we have an opportunity, and I think it's incumbent upon us in the community that are in these organizations and who live and work here to answer the call, because there is a real opportunity for people to seek services now. And so with that, I do want to be mindful of time, and I want to pass on to Tamara, who does important work here as well. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, April. Thanks for your work with the vaccination stations, of course, but with behavioral health around the region. I resonate with your comments about parenting. I have 9 children, and so they didn't come with a manual for particularly mental health and how mental wellness. So Tamara Player, she's the Chief Executive Officer for West Yavapai Guidance Clinic. Thank you for being here, Tamara.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for inviting me to participate in such an important community conversation. And I also just want to acknowledge and thank Amy for her courage and for modeling how to have kind of that really tough dialogue. I think she was so just sincere in her presentation, and it was very, very powerful to hear. As the mayor said, I'm Tamara Player. I have the privilege of serving as the Chief Operations Officer for West Yavapai Guidance Clinic. We're the largest integrated behavioral health provider in Yavapai County. We serve all ages from birth to end of life through offering a variety of 46 different programs and services, including a full array of outpatient mental health and substance use, an inpatient hospital, substance use residential program, peer support, primary care, and crisis stabilization. Every day, our staff offer compassionate care to our family, friends, and neighbors who are struggling. It's the mom who lives next door who has so much anxiety, it's really hard for her to leave her house in spite of this desire and want to go to her kids' activities. It's our seniors who are isolated and lonely and contemplating life and whether it's worth it right now. It's the teenager who's failing in school as he can't sleep, doesn't care about his homework or life, or maybe it's one of our employees who's out on leave due to substance use. COVID has certainly exacerbated the challenges that all of us are dealing with before the pandemic. We know that our youth, seniors, and many of us have been significantly impacted, which is one of the many reasons why we have taken action to make it easy for anyone in our community to access services. Next slide. It is normal for any one of us to have difficulty coping with loss or stressors in life. Often talking with our friends and family help get us through. At times, it's helpful if we go to and see our primary care doctor. And at other times, no matter what we do, the things that we do to cope don't seem to help or make a difference. Maybe we're feeling more anxious, having difficulty sleeping, using substances to cope. Maybe we don't feel like eating or we're overeating. Maybe we're having a hard time getting out of bed and we don't want to do the things that typically bring joy to our life. Maybe we're more reactionary and snip at the people that we love. Or maybe things have reached a point where we have excessive worry, fear, sadness, loneliness, and having difficulty concentrating. Whatever you might be struggling with, it is important to know that help is here and you do not need to suffer in silence. Next slide. West Yavapai Guidance Clinic is offering free counseling services to anyone in Yavapai County who has been impacted by COVID. The easiest way to get to us is to call us directly, or you can call 211 and they will connect you to one of our providers. Services available virtually or in person, and we also have individual and group, so it really depends on whatever you're comfortable with. Next slide. We're also offering free webinars on a variety of topics, such as parenting during the pandemic, coping, dealing with anxiety, and loneliness. We will be offering some webinars specifically to seniors as well as other webinars. So please check our website periodically for updates in case you're interested in attending any of those. Next slide. For several years now, we have been providing free services through our senior peer program to help decrease the sense of loneliness. So you heard Leslie talk about some of the programs and some of the work that we certainly have been trying to do. And it's actually through volunteers in our community that we're able to partner. We provide ideas to seniors on how to adapt to life changes, to help successfully manage one's health and maintain emotional wellness. We really are, at this point in time, focusing on porch visits, recognizing that people they're still scared and they're concerned, but we're trying to find a way to connect. Participants must be 60 years or older, and they must reside in Prescott or the Quad City area to participate in the senior peer program. And the number to call or the website is right up on the slide. Next slide. Finally, if you are concerned about someone you love, or if you yourself are thinking that life is just not worth it, our crisis stabilization unit is open 24/7. You just need to show up and we'll take care of the rest. I want to share a quick personal story. My husband and I are parents of 5 adult children now, but when our middle son was in high school, he had thoughts of hurting himself. As parents, we can see when our children are struggling, but it isn't always easy to see, or to tell if it's normal adolescent behavior or normal adolescent challenges. Our son was doing well in school. He had great friends, played varsity sports. On the surface, he looked like life was wonderful. I am so grateful that a friend said something to her parents and that they called us. It's really about community and supporting each other. We were able to talk with him, and while he denied it at first, because teenagers do that, no, I'm fine, right? We were able to get him some counseling. Today, he has a career that he loves, and he just got engaged in February. But in that moment, back in high school, he couldn't see that future, right? We needed to provide him hope. We needed to provide him a path forward. And so that's really why we're here, and one of the very many reasons that I'm committed to doing the work that we do in our community. There is no shame in asking for help, and help is available. You can also go to our website and complete a free anonymous screening. So if you're not sure, you're struggling, you're having some symptoms, but you're not sure what to do, you can, again, just click on the Take the Assessment button. At the end of the screening, there are some suggested next steps, and it could be something as simple as connecting with family or church group, suggesting that you reach out to your primary care physician, or that you actually reach out to seek services. Next slide. So I want to end by saying that there are so many things that you can do today to start to help yourself feel better. We are so fortunate to live in a beautiful community with tons of hiking and biking trails. We have so much to look forward to with the events returning to the courthouse square. I'm really excited about that. The rodeo, the street dance. So let's support each other because together we got this and we can get through. So thank you.
Tamara, thank you. Thanks for all those resources you provide here in the community and the free counseling. That's amazing. And we're so excited to have West Yavapai Guidance here in our community. So thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Lohan. Lohan, is that right? Prescott Crisis Manager for Taros Health. And is he online?
He's on. Yes, he's on. I see him on.
Michael, welcome to our forum here. Can you hear me okay?
So hold on a second. Try that.
Michael, can you hear us?
showing that he's not muted.
Michael, make sure you're not muted on your end if you can hear me.
Hold on a second here. Everything looks okay here, so I'm not sure.
Michael, can you hear us okay? All right.
Hold on a second, Mayor. So because this is the host computer,
Maybe one more mute button somewhere.
Terry commented that she can hear.
Jerry can hear him?
Yeah,
All right.
online, they can hear him.
All right, hold on 1 second here. So give me a sec.
So, Michael, we're working on getting you to be heard here in our
So
council chambers. Apparently,
Heard on Zoom. All right, so I'm going to have to switch over to this computer so it can be heard. So give me a sec here, guys. Let's see here.
Michael, we're working on a few things here. If you can hang on just for a second.
I think a year in with Zoom, we'd all be like perfect. That's right.
That's right.
So
The people online can hear Michael.
Yeah, they can. Michael, can you say something now? I made the council computer the co-host, so that should fix it. Showing that he's muted. Michael, we just asked you to unmute yourself. Oh, I think we might have something. Michael, can you say something? Still not coming through on this. I can't turn this one up because... How about this? How about we go to the next speaker and we'll try to figure it out.
Okay, Michael, I apologize. We're going to go to Jesse Hans, and then we will come back to you here in just a few minutes. So next, we're going to have Jesse Hans with Center for Compassion and Justice. Thanks for being here, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you for having all of us. I know
Whatever
that
you
that's
think
been
will work.
said, but thank you. Coalition for Compassion and Justice is a service to those in need who are lacking housing. Our mission is ending and preventing homelessness. And so you might say, well, what are you doing on this panel? What we believe is that shelter and housing is one of the most basic needs, and that when vulnerability rises out of not having housing and shelter, that those mental health issues that may be already existing are absolutely exacerbated by that. So what we do is we come in contact with folks in our shelter and through our housing, and we do a multitude of things, making sure that basic needs are met. But one of the primary reasons that we want to be so connected with our clients is that we want to be able to see those red flags that have been mentioned today, to be able to connect our clients in with, Spectrum or West Yavapai Guidance or Teros or wherever the services are that they need the most. And so we do that by referring out, but also I think we're a resource to each of the folks up here as well, that when someone is being discharged into homelessness, they know that there's a place for them, that person to go. And then we continue to try to connect them into the community, but also with housing. So one of the things I realized as you ladies were speaking is that some of the things that were mentioned, and I don't think I'm alone here, I could go down that list, Tamara, that you were, getting short with people, maybe having a few more drinks, those things. And I think it's so relatable. And in my own personal life, I can, look around my family and friends and say, this is happening. And it's not just a few people, and it's not just, somebody else's family. I think we can see that in each of our circles. And so in connecting with our clients, we want the very best for our clients, and sometimes we are that only connection. So whereas somebody might have a parent or a sister or a spouse that might try to get them connected with mental health services, sometimes we are that only connection, and we want to make sure that we do our very best and that we honor that responsibility and that relationship in that way. Some of the things that we are seeing within our clientele are, yes, has been an uptick of substance use. So, in our shelter, we're a low barrier shelter. People don't use in our shelter, but they may have used prior to coming in, and we're seeing more of that. We're having more calls for crisis coming in. We're also having more calls from crisis, folks who have stabilized and need a place to be that are currently in homelessness. So we have seen that uptick. We have also seen something that might seem like it's not so connected to behavioral or mental health, but some of the housing, the affordability of housing in this area is affecting our citizens here. And so one story, we have a couple that fell into homelessness. They were renting a home and it became an Airbnb, which I have nothing against Airbnb. But when those things happen, and there's a couple that has had the same rental for 25 years at an affordable rate, and then they fall out of housing, and maybe their only income is Social Security, we're looking at $750 a month. Or, if it's a couple, we might be looking at $1,500 a month. And if you do the math there, 30% of that going towards rental is not very much money, especially in the area that we live. So then what happens with that is that story is not just, one layer. There are many layers. So making sure that those folks have supports, but also that we can get them back into housing. And so many of those things start to impact others. And so when it comes to mental health, we actually, this couple, the fellow was experiencing some mental health problems and did need some resources, but because of some of the barriers that exist there with, societal norms, especially when we're dealing with 65 and older, there was a lack of wanting to engage. So then, that comes into the relationship, and how are we going to speak differently about resources? How are we going to bring somebody to him rather than try to take him to a location? So those are some of the things that we're dealing with. But I think the biggest concern that we have is that there will, a lot of people ask how many people are in shelter right now. And we have actually trended from the beginning of 2020 till now that we have had less and less people in shelter, which is what we expected as we continued to house people. And we were able to continue to house people at our usual rate through the pandemic. And so it feels like a false sense of need, but we need to take into the equation is that there were some stimulus packages that allowed people to get into housing. And we did have several people take that boost in income and be able to turn that into a stable housing situation. We also have a moratorium on evictions that has just been extended, which is wonderful, and it is serving people. But when that moratorium is up and the rental assistance is up, we will have a fallout, and hopefully we can lessen the wave of people that fall into homelessness at that point in time. So those are some of our big concerns, and how that affects the mental health aspect of things is that is one of the basic needs. When we talk about basic needs, we say food, shelter, water. And so when someone falls into homelessness, it is at the very core that they can be rocked. And so, like I said, that can result in a lot of mental health issues. I do want to say the positive side of things, which is that, like I said, the stimulus package allowed for some people to get into housing. The increase in unemployment wages did the same thing. We saw people turn that into stable housing. And we have had some of that CARES Act money come through. So we currently at CCJ have about $200,000 to help people with rental assistance, and at a below poverty income level. So get in contact with us, call us if there's somebody that you think could qualify for assistance. We can help with up to 6 months of rent, especially if you're already in arrears. So there is help out there that can get you back on track. So I hope that helps. And thank you to everybody on this panel that is doing really great work and really trying to get people the resources they need. And thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for collaborating and leading in this space here in the city. I know that you do a lot of work with some other agencies, partner agency or agencies that do the same kind of work. So thanks for what you do here in the city. Our next speaker is, do you want to jump to Michael?
I can certainly try. I have a workaround, but I was going to wait till we're going to implement it. So we're going to try this.
Okay. We'll try for Michael with Taros Health again.
All right, Michael, if you're unmuted, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
There it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
sure
we can. Thank you, Michael, for your patience. We appreciate it. And the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak with you all today. We are truly grateful for the cooperation that we have received in providing services to this community, from law enforcement, local hospitals, to the community-based mental health providers. There's a stellar group of professionals providing incredibly complex, detailed, and necessary services to this community, and we're honored to be a part of that. Over the last year and the last almost 13 months, we've continued to provide 24/7 service in conjunction with the Crisis Response Network and our locally staffed mobile teams in Prescott Valley, and now at a second location at Yavapai College to better serve Prescott. Often people don't understand our process, and our process simply starts with a phone call to the Crisis Response Network. We encourage the community to call before they are feeling overwhelmed or in crisis or, heaven forbid, suicidal. Many community callers will speak to the phone specialist only, and a crisis team will not necessarily be dispatched. Often when people are unsure of what steps to take, speaking to someone is enough to get the resources and decrease the crisis. When hospitals and police call, a team is dispatched immediately. Our goal is to keep each person in the least restrictive environment with solid connectivity to their providers and a safety plan that offers guidance for more than the crisis itself. We're a conduit to care for those with and without services. And as we move forward, it's a question of how can we be of service? This is what we do. We are crisis, and we look forward to being as much of a support as is needed by this community. And we're excited to be here, coming up on 4 years. Nearly 10,000 citizens have been seen. That's amazing. And those are lives that are directly changed. So again, thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Well, thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Thanks for your work here in the region. And we'll see if there's some questions here for you towards the end of this town hall. We're going to move on to the interim police chief, Amy Bonney. Amy and I were talking earlier this week, and she's on the front lines of what's going on here with mental health and has perspective from police. So, Amy, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mayor, and thanks everybody for being here and online as well. And I think I'd like to focus the few minutes that I have today on a couple things. First, how do we fit into this group of people up here who's really working hard to provide much needed services throughout our community, particularly on this mental health front? And so I like to think of all of us up here as kind of a safety net for people. And ideally, we work to educate the community on what their resources are that are available to them prior to them coming into crisis. And unfortunately, as you can imagine, people don't call the police, they don't call the fire department when things are going well. They call us when they need help. And so our response focuses on really plugging those people that need our help in that moment, whether it's with suicidal thoughts or substance abuse or some other type of mental health crisis, putting them in touch with the right resources so that they can create a long-term plan for their safety and maintaining the integrity of their family structures and maintaining the safety of their children and their friends and family that are so important to them. So we work with Mobile Crisis, we work with Leslie to come up with educational materials and to support her efforts, Taros and Spectrum and the CSU and the Sheriff's Office and all these folks up here just to make sure that we have the right resources in place, recognizing that the need is great. And I wanted just to take a brief moment just to talk about the numbers. And I had hoped, as Leslie pointed out, that our suicides in this community are high. And when we looked at those numbers compared, 2019 and 2020, I was hoping that 2021 would bring some respite with some hope. And what I did was took a look at our March numbers. So we saw that March 2020, our numbers for crisis response and suicidal calls for our help were up 25% from March the year before. which was to be a little bit expected with the COVID situation. But when we looked at March of 2021 compared to March of 2020, there was a 30% increase. So we recognize that there's a need just to continue to collaborate and cooperate with the folks that we have here and anyone else that has those needs, so that we can really get those folks the help and support they need. And then conversely, as Amy's story, and everybody's mentioned it, just the power of her story and her courage is recognizing that our first responders are responding to those calls for service, and that they also need the support that is so important to get them through those situations when they see and deal with all that they see and deal with. And so again, working with the folks up here, but also others, to provide public safety specific support to our first responders that have to deal with the after effects of the calls for service that they deal with. So we're going to keep working on both of those fronts and really work in partnership to just continue to build the resources that we have and the options that we have, so that people can plug into the right places and know that they can call for help when they need it.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for your leadership and for what you do here in the city. Our next speaker is Nancy Gardner with Yavapai Justice and Mental Health Coalition. Nancy, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm here today to talk about the Yavapai Justice and Mental Health Coalition. Our mission is to build a healthy and safe community through partnerships and through collaboration. Next slide. The Yavapai Justice and Mental Health Coalition works as a coordinated partnership of community members and leaders and advocates throughout Yavapai County. The coalition recognizes the challenges that some people face when struggling with unmet mental health and substance abuse needs, and they understand that these challenges have the potential for people to intersect with the criminal justice system. The coalition works to bring providers and agencies together to create processes so that people can better access services. Yavapai County Reach Out Initiative connects individuals with behavioral health needs to services no matter when or where they come into contact with the justice system. Mental health awareness, and then I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about the mental health awareness training program. Right now, Yavapai County Sheriff's Office has a grant that was a 3-year grant, and it provides training for school and law enforcement and emergency service personnel in Yavapai County. We're there to help teach to recognize signs and symptoms of mental illness and identify resources that are available for individuals with mental health illness or substance abuse concern. We actually have teachers, principals, counselors, law enforcement officers, sergeants, and police chiefs who actually are instructors on mental health first aid, and they go into the schools and they go into the police departments and they teach how to recognize mental illness and identify subjects who might be having a mental health crisis. And then we connect them to resources. But also, there are many different agencies who provide training, mental health training throughout Yavapai County. So if there's a need for training in your community, individually or for a group, please feel free to give me a call or email me, and I will connect you to the right organization that can get you that training. And if you'd like to research a little bit more, you can go to the next slide, about our Yavapai Justice and Mental Health Coalition Committee, feel free to check out our website, justicementalhealth.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate that. Our final speaker is Sergeant Ethan Stover with Yavapai County Sheriff's Office. Sergeant, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm here to talk about Crisis Intervention Team. It's a system that was developed in 1988 we brought it to Yavapai County about 5 years ago. So this is a system that is in place that takes law enforcement and partners with, if you can go to the next slide, partners with all these different agencies up there. And we train law enforcement officers, deputies, on seeing signs and symptoms of mental illness, on techniques and ways to have a better outcome with contacts with mental illness. We've all seen videos online and on the news about really poor and bad outcomes with people with mental illness and law enforcement. So this is one of the reasons why about 5 years ago, the sheriff's office was really excited and got behind this. And we went to training, and myself and Sergeant Ben Scott with the Prescott Police Department went and became coordinators for this training. And we've brought it to this county. As of today, we've trained approximately 250 law enforcement in Yavapai County on these types of intervention techniques. So it's a very fruitful and beneficial training program, and especially it's especially great because we're starting to see a swing and a shift in law enforcement's acceptance of this. Because I was trained 13 years ago, and we didn't have anything like this. Chief Bonnie was a couple years before that, just a couple, and she didn't have that kind of training. So we're training all of our law enforcement on how to have those better interactions and better outcomes. Let's go to the next slide. This CIT model is a collaborative approach to safely and effectively do these three things. This is our goal: address the needs of persons with mental illnesses, link them to appropriate services, and divert them from the criminal justice system if appropriate. So we're no longer looking to arrest people if they don't need to go to jail and there's a better avenue, even if they've committed some petty crimes. If there's another resource that we can divert them to locally in the community, that we're finding a much better outcome and less, and I'm going to say the word wrong, but I might say it right, recidivism. Is that the right way? Yeah. Where they're not going back to jail because they're getting the resources from Spectrum and from West Yavapai and from CCJ instead of just going straight to jail. So those are the goal. Those are the three goals that we have with the CIT program. Let's go to the next one. These are the challenges that we have in law enforcement that if you're not in law enforcement, sometimes it's hard to see and understand these. So that's why we're talking about this. These types of calls often take more time than other calls for service. We have to be patient as police officers in these types of calls. And sometimes patience is not our best virtue because we have a lot of other calls stacking up, if you can imagine. So this is the training to help us to learn how to be patient, to listen, to hear what's going on, and try to think of other ways of handling this situation than that might be better than jail. Typically, these calls typically involve repeat contacts with individuals who have unresolved mental health needs. That's a lot of the population that Jesse at CCJ deals with. It's just repeat kind of petty, small criminal nuisance, trespassing, shoplifting, that kind of stuff. That if we could get them in some help before they get into the justice system, like I said, a much better outcome for that person and for our community as a whole. Calls for service are frequently in response to a person with mental illness. I just said that, committing a minor nuisance offense. So let's go to the next slide. These are very volatile situations. So just because someone is in a mental health crisis doesn't mean that we as law enforcement can just let our guard down. We can't just walk into it and say, well, they have a mental illness, so we will forget all of our training and safety protocols and deal with the mental illness. It can't go like that. So this is just an extra added bit of training that will help, again, resolve that situation. These calls require officers to have special training and skills. And then this is the big one. This is where, when we first started this about 5 years ago, we did not have the availability of community mental health resources as we do now. We didn't have mobile crisis teams. When we would show up on a call, it was the deputy by himself talking to this individual that's in a mental health crisis, and there was nowhere to go. There was no other resources. But now we have Spectrum and West Yavapai and Taros, if he's still on the phone, that can come out and help mitigate that situation. So let's go to the next slide. And we had to base this off of community needs. We generally have broad discretion in how we address minor offenses when calls when there's no crimes have been committed. So we have some discretion. We're able, as long as there's somewhere to take them, as long as there's someone to come and talk to, as long as there's someone that we can do a handoff, then we can have that we have that opportunity. Again, what does the public want? Our society, our community needs and wants more of this type of training, because we're seeing these rates of suicide. We're seeing these rates of these youth. I mean, I see it in my people I know and my family, my kids, this isolation, it's getting to people. So we need more and more of this training. How law enforcement responds to these individuals can have a tremendous impact on how encounters are resolved. And this is a big part, what future encounters the individuals can expect. If that first encounter that person with the mental illness has with law enforcement is positive, and they are diverted to a community resource, think about what the outcome of the next encounter will be if that one was positive. If it's negative, what's the next encounter? Because, like I said, these encounters are cyclical. It just keeps happening. So the more we can train our officers to handle and interact in a positive way with the community in this regard, the better the outcomes will be. I keep saying that because that's our goal, is to have a good outcome when we're done for that day. So CAT is all about, go ahead, all of them, partnerships, relationships, communication skills, de-escalation skills, understanding mental health issues. So that's what we do in CIT. And we just hope to keep doing more and more of that. And I think it's a huge benefit to our community as a whole. And again, we partner with everyone here pretty much. All law enforcement agencies in Yavapai County have gone through it. So that's all. Thank you,
Sergeant. I could use some of that patience training.
Yes.
Good. No, I appreciate what you guys are doing with CIT. That's, it's an extra effort. It's something that you're going above and beyond to do for those folks that you encounter, and I appreciate what you're doing there. We have about 25 minutes. John, I want to thank everybody up here and Michael for the presentations, but do you want to go over how we're going to do Q&A?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. We'll begin with questions from anyone who's here in person, and then we'll go to those on Zoom. So if you're here in person and you'd like to ask a question, we would like you to raise your hand and the mayor will acknowledge you. If you'd like to step up to this podium here and speak into that microphone, make sure you're clear speaking into the microphone so that our Zoom friends can hear you. Please state your name and then tell us the question and who the question is directed to. And then for those on Zoom, as I mentioned earlier, we'll look for some questions in the chat box, and I will read those once we're done with the in-person questions. So we'll try to get through all the questions. If we don't get to everyone's questions, you can always email us at communications@prescott-az.gov, and we'll put that in the chat for the Zoom friends. So,
all right, very good. Well, with in-person, you guys get the benefit of being first, and I'll just kind of go left to right over here. So this gentleman on the left, yeah, go ahead. And if you can just direct it, hopefully to one person, that would be ideal, but maybe it's for the whole panel.
Well, hi there. It's kind of to everybody. We've been in this situation for 22 years. I've had the blood on my hands where I've had to keep my daughter from bleeding out, where she's committed suicide many times. It's taking, and I don't know if people realize how hard it is to get the help that everyone's talking about here. And we've heard this for 22 years. But when it gets down to really needing it, it's always, take them in, get them stable, and they kick them out. They don't get the help. And at least in our case, finally what happened is our daughter, she's done it all to try to kill herself.
She's been, okay, let me.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I know like all the services, that's why we came, because it seems like it's very easy to navigate through the system but it's not. Since she was 13 years old, she has borderline personality disorder. She has major depressive disorder, OCD, ADD. She's social phobia, okay? And we have been trying, and it's not only here, Vegas, we had a lot of problems with, and in Phoenix. And it's a lot harder to navigate through the system than people think. You get a lot of times she would go in and they would just kind of spew her out. And so, but the last year, she tried to commit suicide, I believe, 4 times.
Finally, what happened is, because the last time she gave up, so finally she tried to get the cop to kill her. She reached for the gun to try for suicide by cop. And they went ahead and charged her for that and made a criminal out of her. She's never had a parking ticket, but now she has that.
Well,
but thank God it happened because the court ordered help for her. If the court hadn't ordered help, we would never have gotten help, and our daughter would not be alive. And it was Spectrum that's really, we want to thank them. They saved our daughter's life, and she's alive because of them. But we would never have got it if it wasn't for the court ordering it.
But one thing I would like to say is, and as far as like the police, you were training, and I think that's a really good thing because we have called the police so many times on our daughter, and she had, well, like he said, she's actually had 2 incidents. Right now, she does have a felony against her for assaulting a police officer and for domestic violence, which my daughter was mentally ill. We called the police to help save our daughter, and then she ended up being. Right now, she's in the system, and I mean, she's being treated like a criminal.
Well, they charged her. They charged her criminally so they could keep her in custody. Keep her alive, which was good.
She'd had that. That was in August. This happened last August. And then prior to that, believe it was maybe 8 months prior to that, we had called the police because she had gone off, because she lives with us. And she had said to me she was going to kill herself. And I walked away for a minute. I don't know what it was. And she was gone. So we called the police. She had taken her backpack and a rope and the whole thing. Anyway, we called the police, and they came out, and 2 officers came out, and they tried to talk to her, and she was very thirsty because she had been gone for about an hour. So I said, well, would you like me to get you some water? And I had left them. Well, when I came back, they had her flat on the ground, and they had said that she assaulted them, but actually, in the police report, it said that he had a little cut on his finger right here. That was it. And so I just think the officers need to really learn how to, I know everyone is not, our daughter is mentally ill, and she needed that compassion. She didn't need to be thrown on the floor, ground, handcuffed, and hauled away. And
so if I could jump in, I'm sorry, just for the sake of time, I want to thank you as parents for being persistent and helping your daughter. I'm glad that Spectrum was a resource, and thanks for being here and sharing your story, and thanks for attending the town hall.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
My name is Teresa Glennon. I'm extremely nervous, so I just want
No worries. And try to use that mic just for the sake of those online. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Teresa Glennon, and I am very nervous. My son is in Camp Verde jail right now, 3 months on suicide watch. He's chewed his wrists. He's thrown himself off bunks. He's banged his head on the floor. He's banged his head on the wall. He can't get out of suicide watch for 3 months. He admitted himself on January 7th to Windhaven voluntarily. He was arrested at Windhaven when a woman who is described as violent went into his room in the middle of the night and awakened him. His lights were off. He was sound asleep. And she awakened him. He was in Windhaven for in addition to a psychotic break. He was there to for lack of sleep deprivation, altered mental status from sleep deprivation, and he was arrested after a woman who's described in the police reports as a violent hypersexual woman went into his room in the middle of the night, and he is 3 months now in Camp Verde on suicide watch. I am outraged. I've listened. You guys are doing awesome work. My son has fallen between the cracks here, and he is being treated so badly. And I want to know who I can go to. He went in voluntarily, and then after a day, he decided to leave, and Windhaven, to their credit, said they were going to put him on a Title 36. But before they came and got him, Pronghorn was supposed to come and get him. He was sleeping in his room at night. I think we have a right to expect that a patient at Windhaven is able to sleep in his room at night. The door is shut, the lights are off, and he is sleeping. And there were a lot of conclusions that were jumped to that my son had committed assault. They actually had called a rape in on him. And this is a hypersexual woman with a history of harassing men in this facility. So I need someone here to tell me who is in charge. Where's the umbrella here to get my son out of RTC? Because my understanding is RTC is to return him to competency so he can stand trial for something that he shouldn't have been arrested in the first place. I think there's an expectation when a mentally ill young man, 30 years old now, is in Windhaven, that staff don't allow a hypersexual violent woman to go in and awaken my son.
Right. So would the question be maybe for you, for this panel, how can I advocate for my son? How can
I'm
we?
Doing everything I can. I've written to, I'm sorry.
Tamara.
Tamara.
Okay. Yeah.
I've spoken with the I've done everything I can. I need someone with some power who can say this young man has been treated very, very badly, that you shouldn't be in a psychiatric hospital for mental illness and then be arrested for acting mentally ill. Title 36 is for if you're deemed to be a danger to self or others, right? He had been granted Title 36, and then he's a danger to self or others. Where is the responsibility for the staff in that hospital?
So let's ask Chief Bonnie. She's got something.
So I think there's a couple different questions that we can answer, but probably not here. So what I would just, I'll give you my business card, and between all of us, we'll figure out, I can't guarantee you what the outcome will be, but we'll figure out what your options are. And
I just want to be able to sit with somebody and have them hear I don't need to understand. I've read the police report. There are lies. There are inconsistencies.
And we really can't, in a public forum, we can't.
I get it, but I just need somebody that can help me.
We'll talk, okay? I'll give you my card.
It's going to be you and me?
And
okay.
Yes, we'll get you the resources that you
Prescott
need.
Valley originally they responded to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that mean like right away?
Right after this.
My card as soon as we're done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Somebody else here in person? Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
First of all, I want to thank you all for coming here. This is huge. I've lived in this community since 1981, and this is immense to have you folks here. So first of all, I want to thank you all for coming here and sharing. My son has been in the system since 2014, so we've known all the CEOs and doctors with West Yavapai. My son's aunt is Laura Norman, who you used to hear on the radio a lot. I want to also give kudos to the police department, because the first time I had to call the police on my son, he was having an episode and he was running in the woods. The police came. I had to write a letter to the courier because I was so grateful how those police officers handled him. And now I'm seeing that there is training and whatnot, which they didn't have before. So, and as what's going on in this country, we know that the drugs and violence and everything, and it's not just one or two persons that has some social stigma about mental health. It used to be, oh, you're defective or whatever. And I understand why people are afraid to come forward. Is anybody here from Prescott Valley representing? We have a ton of people out in Prescott Valley. And I know we have the stabilization unit, but what about, you know, I know the clinic and everything else, but is there anybody here from Prescott Valley? I'm from Prescott Valley. So it would be nice to have somebody that, like, from Windhaven to come and be here. That would have been great. I have a suggestion that even though there's a lot of older folks, which I am now one, that I have no idea that there was all these services. And I'm not just one. I'm one of many, because we have a lot of older people, Prescott Valley, Prescott, and they don't know how to do the computer. They don't know how to ask for help. One thing, I think radio would be a great thing to have on the radio. Like Laura used to come on the radio, talk about this. I don't know if there's that right now, but I think that a lot of old folks can turn on the radio. Okay, a lot of them don't do all the fancy gadgets. I'm one of them. I do know how to use the computer, but there's a lot of people that are afraid of that. Okay, older people.
That's a good suggestion. Do you have a question for us?
Yes, I do. I want to know if I've seen an increase in the population in Yavapai County, Prescott, Prescott Valley, Scalva, all of them. Are they hiring more people to help these folks or are we still operating at a lower employee? So that's just what I want to know. If we've had, more people in the mental health field to help with these, and not one of your case managers said when he first got hired, was one of my son's case manager. They told him 18 caseloads. After being there, he had 180. Okay, so.
Well, let's get to your question. Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's start with Leslie Horton, and then we'll jump to Tamara.
I wanted to really quickly address that issue of whether we represent Prescott or Prescott Valley or these areas. Most of us on the panel represent work in all areas of the county, if not the Quad City area, or there's only a couple of people that are specific to Prescott on this panel. Most of us do serve the whole county, and I have seen a dramatic increase, even over the past 5 years, of services offered through Spectrum Healthcare, through West Yavapai Guidance, and even through YCSO and their mental health offerings, and through the Justice and Mental Health Coalition, and all of those things working together, hiring more individuals, bringing in more grant monies and other things to support mental health interventions, and especially healthful interventions that'll be the right interventions for those folks that truly need it, who don't really fall into a specific place in the system, trying to find that specific place that's going to work best for them. So that's what I would say to answer that part of the question, at least.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Tamara, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would just say we do have outpatient and services in Prescott Valley, specifically for adults and kids. And I think workforce is always a challenge. We have seen a 20% increase in the number of people coming to our CSU, a 67% increase calls for same-day access. And so, we're trying to be really, really creative in how we bring more people here. So we're doing a lot more hiring outside of the area. as well as recruiting talent here in Yavapai County.
Very good. April, just give us some perspective on the growth of Spectrum, kind of to that question.
Yes, thank you. And so I want to point out, too, that there's a couple of flyers in the back of the room, and they'll be provided virtually as well on ways to access the virtual services that Spectrum's Anywhere teams provide. And part of the thinking behind the creation of those teams was to exactly all of your points is that, accessing services like this has been incredibly difficult for a very long time. And so we have to find the ways in which people want to be served, and particularly as a result of the pandemic, making sure we're mobilizing two areas. So our Anywhere healthcare teams are really able to go anywhere in the county, either virtually or in person, to people's homes, bring people into the facilities. So we are really county-wide in Prescott Valley, across. I mean, we've been out to Ashfork, to Congress, to Wilhoit. Our goal really is to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the entire county, and that those needs are, and those services to meet those needs are informed by what people want. So for me, things like this are incredibly valuable because your experiences and your challenges in accessing our services inform our performance improvement processes. So I really appreciate each of you coming and sharing your stories, and I would love to talk with you all more about those experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. John, do you have something online there for us, a question?
I do. And actually, Michael from Taros also said that they serve all of Western Yavapai County as well. So I think there is a countywide effort. So it was a question for CCJ. This individual, Kyla, said that she had heard that she had been told by residents that the bed count had been reduced down to 12. And she wanted to know if that's indeed the case and if there's a plan to improve that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the truth. That's accurate. Our bed count right now and the size of the area that we have for shelter is 12. What we're seeing nightly is on average 8 to 10 people. So we know that right now that's appropriate for the needs that are in our area right now. And what I will say is as that may expand, as some of the resources go away that have been put in place through the CARES Act, we do have plans that if we have a higher shelter need, that we will utilize a different location. So we're always going to meet that need, and we know that that's our number one priority is to make connections with people who are the most vulnerable, and we consider that folks who don't have any place to stay at night. So that's accurate, but also we have plans to expand if necessary.
Great.
Thank you, Jesse. Anything else online, John?
Yeah, I do have a comment and a question from Courtney Osterfeld with the Launchpad. So she said that our teens at the Launchpad are putting together a resource zone for teens about teen-friendly mental health. Scrolling down, mental health resources, both local and national. They're wondering if there are ever exceptions to the law that would allow a teen who is under 18 to receive counseling or therapy without parent consent.
Somebody want to jump on that one? Without parent consent under 18?
Is there anything being considered, is what she asked.
So can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. So the question is, they were wondering if there are ever exceptions to the law that would allow a teen who's under 18 to receive counseling or therapy without parental consent.
Crisis counseling. Yes.
Crisis counseling?
Yes. I mean, if somebody's in crisis, we're going to respond and provide service, regardless. So.
And what defines that?
Crisis.
Individual.
Yeah, the individual defines a crisis, so it's pretty subjective. If a person is saying that they're in crisis, or if we're assessing that the person is in a place where they can't keep themselves safe, then we would respond as if it's a crisis, regardless of age.
Okay. Good. I'm going to take one more question out here from Ray, and then we're going to wrap up.
I'm Ray Newton. My question is very simple. How does Prescott and Yavapai County rank in comparison to the other counties in Arizona?
In what regard, Ray?
In mental health issues, treatment.
Okay. Can you narrow that down a little bit? Mental health treatment in terms of service?
How do we compare to other counties in the state of Arizona in our treatment of those who have mental health issues?
Okay. Leslie, you want to give that a shot?
That is a very good question.
I am not absolutely sure. I know where we rank in terms of the issues that we face, in terms of our needs for intervention, in terms of a score on ranking us and our interventions against the other counties. I actually do not know how well we're doing in regards to the others. Do either of you in mental health intervention know?
I think we always get ranked in terms of how, our problems versus how well we're responding to the problem. And so I think that is something to look at.
I would add to that I think.
Yeah, hang on. I'll get to you.
I would add that I think, all of us are constantly looking at where are the gaps in the community. I mean, we've heard several of those today. And then how do we, because I believe we aspire to do our best and to do better. We're not perfect systems, or both of, I know our organizations, and I think if Taros and Southwest were here, they would say the same thing. We are very committed and to growth and meeting the needs of our community. And we see that every day through the different services that we're starting. Spectrum wasn't offering mobile crisis that many years ago, and again identified a gap in the need. And so getting feedback from you today I think is really helpful, and to continue the community conversation as well about where you see the gap so that we can work to better address those needs.
Ray, you already know this, but we live in a special county, and the Quad City area is very special. I think in terms of collaboration, whether it be fire or police, law enforcement or mental health, I'm going to rank us pretty high, but I'm biased. But I do see a lot of collaboration here. You can sense that from this panel, and I think it's pretty unique here in Yavapai County. So, but thanks for your question. All right.
Hi, my name is Karen Studdard, and I've been active in the mental health community for about 28 years. I've seen lots of changes, and just seeing you all here today does my heart a lot of good, because we've struggled for a long time. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so what I'd like to see is maybe you could go ahead and give us a declaration that, and what I'd also like to see is anyone here from the Courier?
Not here in the room that I see, but they may be online.
What we've done in years past is every day we would put, for at least a week, could be a month, whatever, they decide. We would usually put stories because, 25 years ago, people would, I did a series of articles about different illnesses because serious mental illness is a neurobiological brain disorder. We know that. But you can't see a broken brain. You know, if they're in a wheelchair or something, then, so I thought, well, it'd be great to really get the information out there. What's schizophrenia, what's bipolar, what's depression, so that people would have an idea. And I actually had people calling me. I put my phone number and saying, my next door neighbor has a mental illness. Is he going to kill me? That's how in the dark ages we were. But what I'm thinking is this would be a good opportunity to, as a coalition, to put articles in the paper. And especially Amy was so courageous and brave to come and share her story that's relatable.
Right.
You can hang on to it. It's not just this, mental illness or maybe I'm feeling bad today or whatever. That we could do some kind of a collaboration, even letting them know what law enforcement does. I actually brought the CIT program to Arizona from Memphis because I talked to a lieutenant there. So we brought it to the post. Anyway, so I would like to just throw that out there that maybe we could, personal stories just, get you and you go, oh my God, that's me.
Right.
Or whatever, and make it more normal. People need to know this is normal.
Right.
This is what happens.
Well, that's why we're here today, to try to do that. And I want to thank you for your efforts here locally, and we'll probably look at a proclamation. John will take note of that. I appreciate that.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for being here.
Well, I need to, do you have something real quick? Go ahead.
I'm Joyce Tatum, and I've been in the mental health field a long time too, and it was just wanting to give back. And I started to become a volunteer for the Justice and Mental Health Coalition, and I was told it's going to be a little bit before volunteers are let in. Do you have any idea? Anyone have any idea when you're going to start to let volunteers volunteer? Thank you.
If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to look into that for you.
Okay, I have my packet ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I want to thank the panel for sharing your insight as well. We have some great information here. The video from this meeting will be posted on City of Prescott website and on the City of Prescott YouTube channel. If you'd like to contact one of our speakers today, you can email us at communications@prescott-az.gov. This is an important topic. We probably reached about 60 people today. So the power of this is probably not in the last 2 hours. The power of this is you sharing the video, sharing the information, and helping us get this out to the community as much as you can. So I would really appreciate that. I want to just also say thanks for your participation. Thank you, John, for your help. And we just need to continue this dialogue to make it more normalized, where people understand this is a part of who we are, and this exists here in our county, in our city, and we have resources to help. So thank you all again. The panelists, I'm going to offer them up to be here for a few minutes after the meeting. If you'd like to connect with someone for a few minutes, I'm sure they would be happy to do that, to have further conversation. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, everyone, and God bless Prescott.
Thank you.